The mahogany table in my parents' dining room had witnessed 35 years of family dinners, holiday celebrations, and occasional arguments. But that Tuesday evening in October, it became the stage for a cruelty I'd never imagined my mother capable of. I sat there, watching her manicured fingers drum against the polished wood, while my grandmother, the woman who'd practically raised me, shrunk into herself like a flower wilting under an unexpected frost. My name is Daniel Chun. I'm 39 years old, and I work as a senior architect at a firm in Seattle, designing glass towers that scrape the sky while keeping my feet firmly planted on the ground my grandmother taught me to respect. Success had come gradually but surely. The corner office, the six-figure projects, the respect of clients who trusted me to shape their dreams into steel and concrete. But sitting in my childhood home that night, watching my mother's lips curl with barely concealed contempt, I felt like a failure. Because what good was all that success if I couldn't protect the one person who'd loved me without conditions, without expectations, without ever asking for anything in return? Mother, my mom began, and the word itself sounded like an accusation. Victoria Chun, née Victoria Blackstone, had perfected the art of making familial titles sound like insults. We need to discuss the wedding arrangements, specifically the guest list. My grandmother, all 78 years of her wrapped in a simple cardigan I'd bought her last Christmas, looked up with those gentle brown eyes that had watched me take my first steps, speak my first words, cry my first tears of heartbreak. Of course, Victoria. How can I help with Jamie's wedding? Jamie, my younger brother, the golden child who'd followed every path our parents had laid out for him. Harvard Business School, investment banking, an engagement to Serena Whitfield, whose family owned half of Martha's Vineyard and acted like it. The wedding was set for next summer at some estate that cost more to rent for a weekend than most people made in a year. That's just it, my mother said, leaning back in her chair like a judge about to pass sentence. You can't help. In fact, we've decided it would be best if you didn't attend. The words hung in the air like smog, poisonous and choking. I watched my grandmother's face, saw the confusion flicker across it before understanding dawned. I don't understand, Grandma said softly. Did I do something wrong? My father, Robert Chun, cleared his throat. He'd been silent until now, hidden behind his Wall Street journal like it was a shield. But when he folded it and set it aside, I knew he was about to make things worse. He always did when he tried to help. It's not about right or wrong, Ma, he said, using the childhood term that sounded strange in his corporate executive voice. It's about image. The Whitfields have certain expectations. Their guest list includes senators, Fortune 500 CEOs, international dignitaries. We need to present a united, sophisticated front. And I'm not sophisticated, my grandmother said. It wasn't a question. You're just a rustic widow? My mother snapped, finally showing her true colors. You live in that old house in Chinatown, you wear clothes from discount stores, you can barely speak proper English at formal events. How do you think that looks? How do you think that reflects on our family? Each word was a slap, and I felt every one of them as if they'd been directed at me. Because in a way they were. Every criticism of my grandmother was a criticism of where we'd come from, of the roots my parents had spent decades trying to sever. Mom, I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. That's enough. Victoria turned those cold eyes on me. Don't start, Daniel. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? You're telling the woman who raised me that she's not good enough to attend her own grandson's wedding. How does that not concern me? She didn't raise you, my mother said dismissively. We raised you. She was just... Help. Help. The word hit me like a physical blow. Help. As if all those years my grandmother had been there when my parents were too busy climbing social ladders to notice their son needed them were just hired assistants. As if the woman who'd taught me to read using old Chinese newspapers, who'd stayed up all night when I had pneumonia at age 7 because my parents were at a conference in Switzerland, who'd been the only one to show up to my elementary school play because something came up at the office, as if she was just the help. I looked at my father, hoping for some sign of the man who used to sneak me extra dumplings when Mom wasn't looking. But he just nodded along with his wife, his face a mask of agreement. "Your mother's right," he said. "We have to think about appearances. The Whitfields are particular about their social circles. One wrong impression and the whole merger could fall apart." Merger, of course, because this wasn't really about a wedding at all. It was about business. The Whitfield Group and Chen Industries had been dancing around a partnership for months. Jamie's engagement to Serena had been the catalyst that might finally close the deal. And my grandmother, with her accented English and modest clothes, was a liability to their corporate ambitions. "Grandma stays or I don't come," I said simply. The table erupted. My mother's voice rose to shrill heights about family loyalty and knowing one's place. My father launched into a lecture about business realities and the sacrifices necessary for success. Jamie, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up to weakly suggest that maybe we could find a compromise, which earned him glares from both parents. Through it all, my grandmother sat quietly, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. She didn't defend herself, didn't argue, just sat there absorbing their cruelty like she'd absorbed so many other blows life had dealt her. "Enough?" I said, standing so abruptly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Grandma, come on. We're leaving." "Daniel, sit down," my mother commanded. "We're not finished." "Yes, we are." I helped my grandmother to her feet, noticing how she trembled slightly. "We're done here. And if you go through with this, if you actually exclude her from Jamie's wedding, then you've lost a son. Because I won't be part of a family that treats its elders like embarrassments to be hidden away." My grandmother touched my arm gently. "Daniel, please, don't fight with your parents because of me." "I'm not fighting because of you," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm fighting because of me. Because of who they want me to be versus who you taught me to be. And I choose your version every time." We left them sitting there in their perfect dining room with their perfect plans for their perfect merger. I drove my grandmother back to her house in Chinatown, the one my parents considered such an embarrassment. It was small, yes, and old, certainly, but it was also warm and real and filled with memories of a childhood where I'd actually felt loved. "You shouldn't have done that," she said as I helped her inside. "Your parents, they're still your parents. They're strangers who happen to share my DNA," I said bitterly. "You're my family. You always have been." She made tea. She always made tea when emotions ran high, and we sat in her tiny kitchen that smelled like jasmine and history. The kitchen where I'd done my homework while she cooked. Where I'd cried over my first heartbreak. Where I'd told her I wanted to be an architect, and she'd said, "Then build beautiful things, my Daniel. Build things that last." "They're not entirely wrong," she said quietly. "I am just a rustic widow. I don't fit in their world. Their world is built on appearances and lies," I said. "Your world is built on love and truth. I know which one I prefer." She smiled sadly. "You're a good boy, Daniel. Always have been. Even when you were small, you had such a big heart. You used to bring home injured birds, stray cats, broken toys you were sure you could fix. I learned it from you." "No," she said, and there was something strange in her voice. "You learned it despite everything. Despite the secrets. Despite the lies." She paused, staring into her tea. "There are things about me, about our family, that you don't know." I don't care about any of that, I said. I don't care if you're a rustic widow or a queen in disguise. You're my grandmother. That's all that matters. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. A decision being made. Perhaps, she said finally, perhaps it's time you knew the truth. But before she could say more, her phone rang. She frowned. It was past 9, late for anyone to be calling. She answered in Mandarin, listened for a moment, then switched to English. Yes, this is she. Yes, I understand. No, that won't be necessary. I'll handle it myself. Thank you for calling. She hung up and sat back down, but something had changed. The grandmother I'd known all my life seemed to shimmer and fade, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone with steel in her spine and secrets in her eyes. That was my bank, she said calmly. There's been some unusual activity on one of my accounts. I need to make a call. She pulled out a second phone I'd never seen before, sleek and expensive looking. She dialed a long number from memory, waited, then spoke in rapid French, then German, then what sounded like Russian. I sat there, jaw-dropping, as my rustic widow grandmother conducted what was clearly a complex financial conversation in languages I didn't even know she spoke. When she hung up, she looked at me with those same gentle eyes, but now I saw what I'd missed before. Intelligence, power, a lifetime of carefully maintained camouflage. Grandma, I said slowly, what the hell was that? She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. That, my dear Daniel, was the sound of chickens coming home to roost. Your parents want to exclude me from the wedding? Fine. But they should have been more careful about which bridges they burned. I don't understand. You will, she said. But not tonight. Tonight you go home to your wife. Tell her you love her. Hold your children close. Tomorrow, everything changes. I wanted to press her for more, but something in her expression stopped me. I'd seen that look before when I was young and asked about Grandpa, about why we had no pictures of him, why she never talked about her life before coming to America. It was the look that said some stories weren't ready to be told. I drove home to Queen and in a daze. My wife, Melissa, was reading in bed, but she sat up when she saw my face. How bad was it? She asked. I told her everything. My mother's cruelty, my father's compliance, the strange phone calls. Melissa listened, her expression growing darker with each detail. They actually said she couldn't come to the wedding? Because she's not rich enough. Because she's not sophisticated enough? I corrected bitterly. Because she might embarrass them in front of their precious Whitfields. Your grandmother is worth a dozen Whitfields, Melissa said fiercely. She's the only reason you turned out human instead of like them. I know, but there's something else. Something weird. I told her about the phone calls, the languages, the second phone. It was like watching Clark Kent turn into Superman, except with financial transactions. Melissa frowned. You think she's hiding something? I know she is. The question is what? We talked until late, spinning theories ranging from reasonable to ridiculous. Maybe she'd inherited some money. Maybe she'd made some good investments. Maybe she was secretly a retired spy. That last one was Melissa's contribution, delivered with a laugh, but after what I'd witnessed, it didn't seem entirely impossible. The next 2 days passed in a blur of normalcy. I went to work, reviewed blueprints, attended meetings. But my mind kept drifting back to that kitchen, to the phone calls, to the look in my grandmother's eyes when she'd said everything would change. I tried calling my parents once. My mother had answered, her voice crisp and businesslike. Have you come to your senses? She'd asked. Have you? I'd countered. Don't be dramatic, Daniel. This is a simple matter of social compatibility. Surely you can understand that. What I understand is that you're a snob who's forgotten where she came from. I've forgotten nothing, she'd said coldly. I've simply chosen to evolve beyond it. As should you. She'd hung up after that, and I hadn't tried again. Jamie had texted, a long rambling message about family peace and finding middle ground and how maybe Grandma could attend the ceremony but not the reception. I'd sent back 2 words, grow up. He hadn't responded. On the second evening, I was making dinner when my phone rang. Melissa was giving the kids a bath, and I could hear their laughter echoing down the hall as I answered. Mr. Chan? This is Margaret Liu from Liu, Patterson and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor Chun. Would you be available for a meeting tomorrow morning? It's regarding some family financial matters that require your attention. I frowned. Is my grandmother okay? She's perfectly fine, sir. This is regarding some estate planning issues she wishes to address. Can you come to our offices at 9 a.m.? I'll send you the address. Estate planning. My heart sank a little. Was this about her house? Was she worried about what would happen to it after? I pushed the thought away. Grandma was healthy, vibrant. She had years left, decades even. I'll be there, I said. The law offices of Liu, Patterson, and Associates weren't what I'd expected. I'd imagined something small, maybe in Chinatown, the kind of place that handled wills for modest estates and helped with immigration paperwork. Instead, the address led me to one of Seattle's most prestigious office towers, the kind with marble lobbies and doormen who looked like former Navy SEALs. The elevator whisked me up to the 42nd floor, opening onto a reception area that screamed old money and older secrets. The receptionist, an elegant woman who could have been anywhere from 30 to 50, smiled at me. Mr. Chan? They're expecting you in conference room A. Right this way. She led me down a hallway lined with what looked like original Rothkos and Pollocks. Either very good fakes or the kind of art that costs more than most people's houses. Conference room A turned out to be a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Elliott Bay. And there, sitting at a conference table that could have seated 20, was my grandmother. Except not. This wasn't the woman who wore cardigans from Target and clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. This woman wore a suit that probably cost more than my car. Her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon instead of the simple bun I'd always known. Diamond earrings caught the morning light. When she looked up at me, even her posture was different. Straight, commanding, regal. Daniel, she said, and at least her voice was the same. Warm, loving, with just a hint of an accent. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I sat, feeling like I'd stepped through the looking glass. Grandma, what is this? What's going on? This is Margaret Liu, she said, gesturing to a woman I hadn't even noticed. She's been my attorney for the past 30 years. And this, she gestured to a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, is James Patterson, managing partner. They're here to help me explain some things. Things I should have told you long ago. Mrs. Chen, Margaret Liu began, has asked us to provide you with some background on your family's financial situation. We understand this may come as something of a shock. A shock? I laughed, but it came out strangled. My grandmother is sitting in a law office that looks like it represents Fortune 500 companies, wearing diamonds and designer clothes. Yeah, you could say I'm shocked. My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were the same, wrinkled, marked by age, warm with affection. I'm still me, Daniel. Still your grandma who made you soup when you were sick and helped you with your math homework. But I'm also someone else. Someone I've kept hidden for 40 years. Why? I asked. Why hide? Whatever this is? She squeezed my hand, then let go. To protect you. To protect your father. to protect myself from a past that refuses to stay buried. She nodded to Margaret, who opened a leather folder. Mr. Chun, Margaret said, what do you know about your grandfather? Not much, I admitted. Grandma never talked about him. I know he died before my father was born. I assumed, I don't know, that it was too painful to discuss. Your grandfather, my grandmother said quietly, was Chun Wei-lin. Does that name mean anything to you? I shook my head. James Patterson cleared his throat. Chun Wei-lin was one of the most successful businessmen in Hong Kong in the 1960s and early 1970s. He built an empire from nothing: shipping, real estate, manufacturing. At his peak, he was worth approximately $2 billion in today's money. 2 billion. The number didn't seem real. But if that's true, why did you live the way you did? Why the small house, the modest life? Because Chun Wei-lin was also connected to the triads, my grandmother said bluntly. Oh, he kept his legitimate businesses clean, but everyone knew he had ties to the 14K. Protection money, smuggling, all carefully hidden behind corporate veils. I was young, in love, and I didn't want to see it, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. She stood, walked to the windows. The morning light made her look younger somehow, or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Your grandfather was murdered in 1972, she continued. A business dispute, they said, but I knew better. He'd been trying to go completely legitimate to cut ties with the triads. They didn't appreciate that. After he died, I had a choice: stay and fight for his empire or run. I was 25 years old, pregnant with your father, and surrounded by sharks who smelled blood in the water. So you ran, I said. So I ran, but not empty-handed. Wei-lin had taught me well. I liquidated what I could, moved money through Switzerland, the Caymans, dozens of shell companies. I took enough to ensure we'd never want for anything. Then I disappeared. Eleanor Wong, Hong Kong socialite, died in that transition. Ellen Chun, immigrant widow, was born. How much? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. How much did you take? Margaret Liu consulted her files. The current value of Mrs. Chen's holdings, including real estate, securities, and other investments, is approximately $512 million. $500 million. My grandmother, my rustic widow grandmother who shopped at discount stores and cut coupons, was worth $500 million. I think I need some water, I said faintly. James poured me a glass from a crystal pitcher. I drank it slowly, trying to process what I was hearing. Why tell me now? I asked finally. After all these years, why now? My grandmother turned from the window, and her expression was fierce. Because your parents, my son and his wife, have forgotten what family means. They've become the very thing I tried to protect them from. Shallow, materialistic, cruel. They care more about impressing strangers than honoring the woman who sacrificed everything for them. Dad doesn't know, I said. It wasn't a question. He has no idea about any of this. I wanted him to have a normal life, she said. A life free from the shadow of his father's choices. So I became a simple widow, a woman who cleaned houses and took in sewing to make ends meet. I lived in Chinatown because it reminded me of home, not because I had to. I wore simple clothes because designer labels had too many memories attached. And it worked. Your father grew up ambitious but honest, driven but ethical. At least, that's what I thought. He is ethical, I said automatically, then stopped. Was he? The man who'd sat at that table 2 nights ago, nodding along as his wife insulted his mother. Was that an ethical man? He's become what he thinks success looks like, my grandmother said sadly. And somehow, he's decided that success means forgetting where you come from. Well, I'm done being forgotten. I'm done being dismissed as an embarrassment. What are you going to do? She smiled, and it was a smile I'd never seen before. Sharp, calculating. The smile of a woman who'd outwitted triad bosses and built a fortune from the ashes of tragedy. Your parents are so eager to impress the Whitfields? To prove they belong in high society? Let's see how they handle learning that the rustic widow they're so ashamed of could buy and sell the Whitfields 10 times over. You're going to tell them? Oh no, she said. That would be too simple. Too kind. I'm going to show them. And the whole world is going to watch. Margaret Liu pulled out another folder. Mrs. Chun has been quite busy the past 48 hours. She's made some acquisitions. I looked at the papers she spread before me. Real estate transfers, stock purchases, corporate filings. My head spun as I tried to follow the complex web of transactions. Did you buy the Whitfield building? The one where they have their corporate headquarters? Yes. Lovely piece of real estate. I also acquired a controlling interest in 3 of their subsidiaries and the country club where they're planning to hold the wedding reception. Grandma, I said slowly, what exactly are you planning? Justice, she said simply. Your parents want a society wedding? They'll get one. But it won't go quite the way they expected. The next hour was a blur of financial disclosures and legal documents. My grandmother had been busy for decades, it turned out. The simple widow living in Chinatown had built a shadow empire, acquiring properties and businesses through a labyrinth of holding companies and trusts. She owned half of Chinatown, not as a landlord, but as a protector, keeping rents low and preserving the community character. She funded scholarships, supported small businesses, quietly paid medical bills for families who couldn't afford them. All these years, I said, staring at the evidence of her secret philanthropy. You've been like some kind of guardian angel. I had the money, she said simply. What else was I going to do with it? Let it sit in banks while people suffered? That's not who I am. That's not who Wei Lin was, despite his flaws. He believed in taking care of his community. I've tried to honor that in my own way. But now you're going to war with my parents. No, she corrected. I'm going to educate them. There's a difference. By the time I left the law office, my head was spinning. My grandmother, my 5'0" coupon-clipping grandmother, was basically Bruce Wayne, if Bruce Wayne was a Chinese widow with a wicked sense of humor and a plan for revenge. I drove home in a daze, trying to reconcile the woman I'd known all my life with the financial titan I'd just met. They were the same person, I realized. The love, the warmth, the wisdom, that had all been real. She'd just been hiding the power that backed it up. Melissa was working from home and looked up from her laptop when I walked in. How was the estate planning meeting? She asked, then stopped. Okay, you look like you've seen a ghost. What happened? I sat down and told her everything. Her expression went from confused to shocked to delighted as I laid out the whole impossible truth. Your grandmother is secretly worth $500 million? $512 million to be exact. And she's been living in that little house, shopping at discount stores, letting your parents treat her like she's some kind of charity case? Apparently. Oh my God. Melissa started laughing. Oh my God. This is amazing. Your mom is going to lose her mind. Her whole identity is built on being the sophisticated one who married down and elevated your father. And this whole time, his mother could have bought her entire world as a rounding error. I don't think Grandma sees it as funny. Of course not. She's hurt. They hurt her. But Daniel. Melissa's eyes gleamed. She's going to destroy them, isn't she? In the most elegant, devastating way possible. That seems to be the plan. Good. They deserve it. The way they treated her was disgusting. I couldn't argue with that. But part of me, the part that remembered bedtime stories and birthday parties before my parents became what they were now, felt sad. This would change everything. There would be no coming back from whatever my grandmother had planned. The next few days were surreal. I went to work, attended meetings, reviewed plans, all while knowing this massive secret. My grandmother called daily, her voice the same as always, talking about her garden and the neighbor's cat and whether I thought it would rain on Thursday. But now I heard the other layer, the steel beneath the silk. Jamie called once, trying to broker peace. "Look, I talked to Mom and Dad," he said. "Maybe we overreacted. Maybe Grandma could come to the ceremony." "It's too late for that," I said. "Come on, Daniel. Don't be stubborn. This is my wedding we're talking about. You should have thought of that before you let them humiliate her." "I didn't let them do anything. I didn't want to make waves." "No, you never do. That's your problem, Jamie. You're so busy trying to be the perfect son that you've forgotten how to be a decent human being." He hung up on me. I didn't call back. On Thursday evening, my grandmother called with a different tone. "Tomorrow," she said simply. "Can you keep your schedule clear?" "What's happening tomorrow?" "The Whitfield Group is having their quarterly board meeting. Your parents will be there. Your father's been courting them for months, and they've finally invited him to present his merger proposal. It's everything they've been working toward. And they're about to learn that the majority shareholder has some concerns about the direction of the company." "The majority shareholder being?" "As of this morning, me. Through various holding companies, of course. I thought it was time to take a more active interest in my investments." "Grandma," I said, "you bought a controlling interest in a multi-billion-dollar company just to mess with my parents?" "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "I bought it because it's a good investment. The fact that it allows me to attend tomorrow's board meeting is just a happy coincidence." "You're going to reveal yourself at the board meeting?" "Oh no, dear. I'm going to reveal myself at the dinner afterward. The one at the country club. Did I mention I own that now too? Your parents will be there, celebrating what they think is their triumph. The Whitfields will be there. Most of high society will be there. And then," she paused, "well, then we'll see who's just a rustic widow." I should have tried to talk her out of it. Should have argued for forgiveness, for taking the high road. But I couldn't, because I kept seeing her tears at that dinner table, kept hearing my mother's cruel words, kept remembering all the times they'd been too busy or too important to include her in their lives. "Do you want me there?" I asked. "If you'd like. It might be educational." "Then I'll be there." "Good. Wear your best suit, Daniel. After all, we wouldn't want to embarrass anyone with our lack of sophistication." The country club was exactly what you'd expect. Old money trying to look like older money, with dark wood paneling and portraits of dead white men who'd probably made their fortunes in ways that didn't bear close examination. I arrived early, partly out of nervousness and partly because I wanted to see the stage before the show began. The dining room was already set up for the celebration. Crystal glasses, fine china, flowers that probably cost more than most people's rent. I could see my parents across the room, holding court with a group of executives. My mother wore a dress that screamed, "Look at me but tastefully," while my father gestured animatedly, no doubt explaining his brilliant vision for the merger. They looked happy, triumphant, like everything they'd sacrificed, including their relationships with me and Grandma, had been worth it for this moment. "Champagne, sir?" a waiter asked. I took a glass, mostly to have something to do with my hands. The room was filling up now. I recognized some faces from business magazines and society pages. The Whitfields made their entrance like royalty, and I watched my parents rush to greet them, all smiles and deference. "Daniel." I turned to find Serena Whitfield, Jamie's fiancée, looking elegant and uncomfortable in equal measure. "Serena, how are the wedding plans going?" She made a face. "Your mother has opinions. Many, many opinions. I'm starting to think eloping would have been simpler. It's not too late. Don't tempt me." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Jamie told me what happened. With your grandmother. I'm sorry. That wasn't right." I studied her, surprised. "Thank you for saying that. I met her once, at your office. Jamie and I were picking you up for lunch, and she was there dropping off cookies. She was lovely, kind. Nothing like—" She trailed off. "Nothing like what my parents described?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She looked uncomfortable. "Family is complicated." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "Sometimes we make it complicated because we're too afraid to keep it simple." Before she could respond, there was a commotion at the entrance. I turned, expecting to see some late-arriving dignitary. Instead, I saw my grandmother. But like that day in the law office, this wasn't the grandmother I'd grown up with. This was Eleanor Chun in full force, a woman who commanded attention without demanding it, who walked into that room of billionaires and politicians like she owned it. Which, technically, she did. She wore a dress I'd never seen before, midnight blue silk that managed to be both age-appropriate and stunning. Her jewelry was understated but perfect, pearls that glowed against her skin, a bracelet that caught the light just so. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant twist that made her look like royalty. The room seemed to pause, conversations trailing off as people tried to place her. She wasn't familiar, but she carried herself like someone who should be. "Is that—" Serena breathed. "Is that your grandmother?" "That's her. But she looks like someone who belongs here more than anyone else in the room." I was going to say magnificent, but yes, that too. My grandmother's eyes found mine across the room. She smiled, that same warm smile I'd known all my life, and started toward me. But she was intercepted by one of the Whitfield Group board members, an elderly man who did a visible double-take. "Eleanor? Eleanor Wong." She paused, tilted her head. "It's been a long time, Harrison. My God, it is you. But we heard. That is, everyone thought that I was dead?" She smiled. "Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated, though understandable, given the circumstances. More people were noticing now, whispers rippling through the crowd. I saw my parents on the far side of the room, still oblivious, still basking in their moment of triumph. "Grandma," I said when she finally reached me. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, dear. Though I feel a bit like I'm wearing a costume." I'd almost forgotten how heavy formal jewelry can be. She turned to Serena. "You must be Jamie's fiancée. I'm sorry we're meeting under such circumstances." Serena looked between us, clearly trying to process what was happening. "Mrs. Chun, it's lovely to meet you. Formally, the pleasure is mine. You're even lovelier than Jamie described. Though I do hope you're marrying him for himself and not for his parents' ambitions." Serena blushed. Yes, I love Jamie." "Good. Love is the only reason to marry anyone. Everything else, money, status, connections, it's just noise." "Eleanor." A woman approached, elegant in the way that only old money can achieve. "Harrison said it was you, but I couldn't believe it. After Hong Kong." "Hello, Margaret," my grandmother said calmly, still collecting impressionists. "You remember." I'm touched. "But darling, where have you been? It's been 40 years since anyone's seen you." "I've been raising my family," my grandmother said simply. "Living quietly, finding peace." "Peace." Margaret laughed, but it wasn't unkind. "You were never one for peace. You were one for revolution." Waylin always said you were the dangerous one in the partnership. I watched this interaction with fascination. These people knew my grandmother. Not Ellen Chun, the widow from Chinatown, but Eleanor Wong, the woman she'd been before. People change, my grandmother said. Or perhaps they just hide better. More people were approaching now, drawn by curiosity and recognition. I heard fragments of conversation. Hong Kong, the old days, Wayland's empire, where have you been? We thought you were dead. And then, finally, my parents noticed. I saw the exact moment recognition hit my mother. She was mid-laugh at something a board member had said when her eyes landed on my grandmother. The laugh died on her lips. The champagne glass in her hand trembled. My father followed her gaze and went very still. They pushed through the crowd, my mother's face cycling through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror as she began to understand that something was very, very wrong. "Mother?" my father said when they reached us. "What are you doing here? How are you?" He gestured helplessly at her appearance. "Hello, Robert," my grandmother said pleasantly. "Victoria. Lovely party. I do hope I'm not intruding." "You can't be here," my mother hissed, glancing around to see who was watching. Everyone was watching. "This is a private event. How did you even get in?" "Oh, I own the club," my grandmother said casually. "Did I forget to mention that? I've owned it for years, actually. I just never felt the need to visit before." "You, what?" "Mrs. Chun." Thomas Whitfield himself approached, looking curious. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "I'm Thomas Whitfield," my grandmother finished. "Yes, I know who you are. We have several mutual acquaintances. In fact, I believe we have business to discuss." He frowned. "Business?" "Yes. As the majority shareholder of the Whitfield Group, I have some thoughts about the proposed merger with Chun Industries." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room full of Seattle's elite. "I'm sorry," Thomas said slowly. "The majority shareholder?" 52% as of this morning, my grandmother confirmed. "Acquired through various channels over the past few days. Didn't your people inform you?" "I was assured the paperwork was in order." Thomas pulled out his phone, stepped away to make a call. His face went from skeptical to shocked to something approaching panic. "That's impossible," my mother said. "You can't. You don't have the money?" My grandmother suggested gently. "Oh, Victoria, you've been so focused on appearances that you never bothered to look beneath the surface. Though I suppose that's my fault. I played my part too well." "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. "Mother, what is this?" My grandmother sighed. "Perhaps we should sit down. This is a conversation better had with some privacy." She glanced around the room full of avidly watching faces. "Though I suppose privacy is a bit late at this point." Thomas returned, his face pale. "It's true," he said to his assembled board members. "The shares, they've been acquired by a series of holding companies, all tracing back to—" He looked at my grandmother with something approaching awe. "To Chun Wei-lin's estate." "Chun Wei-lin has been dead for 50 years, someone protested. "Yes," my grandmother said sadly. "He has, but his widow has been very much alive. And very patient." The room erupted. Questions, exclamations, people pulling out phones to verify impossible claims. Through it all, my parents stood frozen, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. "You knew," my mother accused, turning on me. "You knew about this." "For about a week," I admitted. "Grandma thought it was time to stop hiding." "Hiding?" my father repeated. "Mother, are you saying? Are you telling me that all these years, all this time when we thought When you thought I was a poor widow barely scraping by? My grandmother finished. Yes, that was a choice I made. To protect you. To give you a normal life. Though I'm beginning to think I made a mistake. A mistake. My mother's voice was shrill. You let us believe you were nobody. You let us struggle. Struggle? My grandmother interrupted, and for the first time, there was steel in her voice. You never struggled a day in your life, Victoria. Yes, I lived modestly. But did Robert ever want for anything? Did I not pay for his education, his first business ventures? Did I not give you both the down payment for your first house, and your second, and your third? But you could have given us so much more. I could have given you money, my grandmother corrected. Instead, I tried to give you values. I see now that I failed. Failed. My father found his voice. You lied to us. For 40 years you lied. I protected you, she said, from a world that had already taken your father. From expectations that would have crushed you. From becoming. She gestured around the room. This, people who value wealth over family. Status over kindness. Appearances over truth. We're not. My mother started. You told me I wasn't welcome at my own grandson's wedding, my grandmother said quietly, because I might embarrass you, because my simple clothes and accented English might make the wrong impression. You were so concerned about impressing these people that you were willing to break an old woman's heart to do it. We didn't know. It shouldn't have mattered. If I had been exactly what you thought, a rustic widow with nothing to her name but the love she bore her family, I should still have been welcome. The fact that I'm not what you thought doesn't make your cruelty any less real. Thomas Whitfield cleared his throat. Perhaps we should postpone the merger discussion until— There will be no merger, my grandmother said firmly. I've reviewed Chun Industries' financials. The company is leveraged to dangerous levels, pursuing growth at any cost. It's exactly the kind of reckless ambition that destroyed my husband. I won't allow the Whitfield Group to be contaminated by it. You can't do this, my father said desperately. We've worked for years. You've schemed for years, she corrected. Building a house of cards that would have collapsed eventually. I'm simply preventing you from taking others down with you. This is revenge, my mother spat. Pure and simple. You're destroying us because we hurt your feelings. My grandmother considered this. Yes, she said finally. There is an element of revenge. I'm human after all. You hurt me deeply. But more than that, this is a correction. You've lost your way, both of you. You've forgotten what matters. Consider this a very expensive reminder. She turned to address the room at large. I apologize for the drama. This wasn't quite how I planned to re-enter society. But then, very little in life goes according to plan. I look forward to working with the board to ensure the Whitfield Group's continued success. For now, though, I think I'll take my grandson and go home. It's been a very long day. She took my arm, and we walked out of that country club together, leaving behind a room full of stunned elites and my devastated parents. As we reached the door, she paused and looked back. Oh, Robert? The house in Chinatown that you're so ashamed of? I'll be keeping it. It's where I raised you, where your father's memory lives. But don't worry, I've also purchased a penthouse downtown. After all, I wouldn't want to embarrass you with my simple lifestyle. The valet brought her car around. Not the ancient Toyota I was expecting, but a pristine Bentley that looked like it had just rolled off the lot. You've been busy, I said. I kept it in storage, she admitted. Waylon gave it to me for our anniversary. I couldn't bear to sell it, but I couldn't drive it either. Too many memories. But tonight seemed appropriate. Where to now? Home, she said. Would you like to come? I'll make tea. The same home? The house in Chinatown. Of course. Where else would home be? I followed her back to the little house that apparently sat on land worth millions. Inside, nothing had changed. The same comfortable furniture, the same photos on the walls, the same smell of jasmine tea and old wood. She changed out of her finery into one of her familiar cardigans, and suddenly she was just grandma again. "So," I said as she puttered around the kitchen, "what happens now?" "Now? Now your parents will rage and scheme and probably try to contest my ownership of the Whitfield shares. They'll fail. Margaret Lou is very good at her job. The society that they were so desperate to impress will gossip about them for months. Some will cut them off entirely, offended by their treatment of me. Others will try to curry favor, hoping to benefit from my wealth. Both groups will miss the point entirely. Which is?" She set a cup of tea in front of me. "That money is just a tool. Can build or destroy, elevate or corrupt. Your parents let it corrupt them. They valued it above family, above kindness, above truth. And now they'll learn what it feels like to have someone with more money use it against them. You don't feel bad? Even a little?" "I feel sad," she admitted. "For the son I raised who became a stranger. For the grandchildren who were taught to be ashamed of their heritage. For the family we could have been if different choices had been made." "What about Jamie? He's supposed to get married in 6 months. Jamie will have to decide what matters more, his parents' approval or his own happiness. If he and Serena truly love each other, they'll find a way. If the wedding was more about business than love, then perhaps it's better it doesn't happen." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping tea in the kitchen where I'd done my homework so many years ago. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said suddenly. "You stood up for me when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You chose principle over peace. That takes courage. I learned from the best." "No," she said. "You learned in spite of everything. That's what makes it remarkable." My phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. "What the hell just happened?" I showed it to my grandmother, who smiled. "The truth happened," she said. "It usually does, eventually. The question is what he'll do with it." "What should I tell him?" "Whatever you think is right. But Daniel, don't let my war with your parents become yours. They're still your family. Flawed, misguided, but family. If they learn from this, if they remember what matters, there might still be hope for reconciliation. And if they don't, then you'll have to decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who holds grudges, or the kind who holds hope." I stayed until late, listening to stories I'd never heard before. About my grandfather, the man who'd built an empire and died trying to leave it behind. About Hong Kong in the 60s, glittering and dangerous. About the choices she'd made and the prices she'd paid. "Do you regret it?" I asked as I was leaving. "Living hidden all these years?" "I regret many things," she said. "But protecting my family from that world? No. I only regret that in trying to protect you from becoming like your grandfather, I couldn't protect you from becoming like your parents." "I'm not like them," I said. "No," she agreed. "You're not. And that gives me hope." I hugged her goodbye, and she felt exactly the same as she always had. Small, warm, smelling of jasmine and love. The richest woman in Seattle, and she still insisted on sending me home with leftover dumplings. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By morning, the story was everywhere. Secret heiress reveals fortune at society gala. The widow worth $500 million. Family drama rocks Seattle elite. The business pages were full of analysis about what Eleanor Chen's emergence meant for the Whitfield Group. The society pages were full of gossip about my parents' humiliation. Jamie called while I was reading the coverage over breakfast. "Is it true?" he asked without preamble. All of it. Every word. Jesus Christ, Daniel. Grandma's been sitting on $500 million this whole time. Apparently. And she just, what? Decided to destroy Mom and Dad's lives because they were mean to her. They told her she wasn't welcome at your wedding because she might embarrass them. I reminded him. What did you think was going to happen? I thought she'd be hurt. Maybe cry a little. Not turn into some kind of corporate raider revenge goddess. Despite everything, I had to laugh at that description. Yeah, well, turns out there's a lot about Grandma we didn't know. This ruins everything, Jamie said. The merger, the wedding, everything we've been working toward. Everything they've been working toward, I corrected. What have you been working toward, Jamie? Really? Do you love Serena? Or do you love what marrying her represents? Of course I love her. Then marry her anyway. Have a small wedding. Invite the people who matter, not the ones who can advance your career. Hell, invite Grandma. She gives great wedding gifts, apparently. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You just have to decide what matters more, love or leverage. He was quiet for a long moment. Did you know she was going to do this? I knew she was planning something. I didn't know it would be this thorough. You could have warned me. Would it have changed anything? Would you have stood up to Mom and Dad? Insisted Grandma be invited. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I said, look, Jamie, you're my brother and I love you. But you need to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be their perfect son. Because that role, it doesn't exist anymore. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about families and the stories we tell ourselves. For 39 years, I'd believed one version of who we were. The hardworking immigrants who'd made good. The success story built on determination and grit. But underneath that was another story. One of secrets and sacrifices, of a woman who'd given up everything to protect her son from a legacy of violence, only to watch him embrace a different kind of brutality. Melissa came into the kitchen, already dressed for work. How's the fallout? About what you'd expect. Jamie's in crisis mode. My parents are probably consulting lawyers. And Grandma is probably having tea and reading the paper like it's any other morning. Good for her. She poured herself coffee. You know what the best part is? What? She did exactly what they valued most. She showed power. She displayed wealth. She proved she belonged in their precious high society. And she did it all to show them how worthless those things are when you use them against family. Poetic justice? The best kind. She kissed me goodbye. Try not to spend all day reading about it. You've got buildings to design. She was right. Life went on. I went to work, where everyone pretended they hadn't read the news while sneaking glances at me. I reviewed blueprints and attended meetings and tried to focus on creating something constructive while my family self-destructed across town. But I couldn't stop thinking about choices. The choices my grandmother had made to protect her family. The choices my parents had made to elevate themselves. The choices that had led us all to that moment in the country club where truth finally won out over carefully maintained lies. That evening, I got a call from an unexpected source. Serena, I hope you don't mind me calling, she said. Jamie gave me your number. Not at all. How are you holding up? I'm confused, honestly. Everything's falling apart. The wedding venue called to say there might be complications with our booking. 3 of the board members who were supposed to be groomsmen have suddenly developed scheduling conflicts. My parents are in damage control mode. And Jamie. She paused. Jamie's talking about postponing everything. I'm sorry. That must be difficult. The thing is, she said slowly, I'm not sure I am sorry. Is that terrible? All these months of planning this enormous wedding, and now that it might not happen, I feel relieved. That's not terrible. That's honest. I met with your grandmother today. I straightened. You did. She called me, asked if I'd like to have tea. I was curious, so I went. A pause. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone bitter? Vindictive? Instead, she was just sad. She asked me about my work. Did you know I'm a pediatric surgeon? Of course you don't. We've barely talked about anything except wedding planning. She asked about my family, my dreams, what I wanted from life. No one's asked me that in so long. What did you tell her? The truth. That I love Jamie, but I'm not sure I love who we become around our families. That I became a doctor to help children but spend most of my time at charity galas instead of the hospital. That sometimes I dream about running away to Doctors Without Borders and actually using my skills for something meaningful. And what did she say? She said that love shouldn't make you smaller. It should make you brave enough to be exactly who you are. Serena's voice was thoughtful. She also said that if Jamie and I decide to get married, she'd be honored to attend, no matter what your parents say. That sounds like her. Daniel, what should I do? I can't answer that. But I can tell you what my grandmother would probably say. Follow your heart, not your portfolio. After we hung up, I found myself driving to Chinatown again. Not to my grandmother's house this time, but just to the neighborhood itself. I parked and walked the streets I'd known as a child, past the restaurants and markets, the herbal shops and bakeries. This was the world my parents had been so eager to leave behind, the community they'd seen as a stepping stone rather than a home. I stopped at Mr. Liu's restaurant, where I'd eaten countless meals while Grandma ran errands. He recognized me immediately. Daniel, I read the news. Your grandmother. She's like a movie star now. Something like that. He shook his head, smiling. We always knew she was special. The way she helped everyone, never asking for credit. Now it makes sense. You can't hide a dragon forever. You knew. Not the details. But we knew she was more than she seemed. The way she carried herself, the connections she had. A cleaning lady doesn't speak 5 languages and have lawyers on speed dial. But we respected her privacy. She was good to us, so we were good to her. He insisted on feeding me, bringing out dish after dish while regaling me with stories of my grandmother's quiet philanthropy. The families whose medical bills mysteriously got paid. The businesses that received anonymous loans just when they needed them most. The scholarship fund that had sent dozens of Chinatown kids to college. Your parents never understood, he said. They thought leaving Chinatown meant leaving poverty. But your grandmother knew the truth. Community is wealth. Connection is currency. Everything else is just paper. I thought about that as I drove home. Paper. That's what my parents had chased. Paper money, paper contracts, paper validation from people who didn't really matter. While my grandmother had built real wealth, relationships, trust, a community that would protect her secrets for 40 years out of love and respect. The next few weeks were a masterclass in damage control. My parents hired lawyers to challenge the stock purchase, claiming manipulation and fraud. The lawyers took one look at Margaret Liu's airtight paperwork and advised them to drop it. They tried to salvage the merger through other channels, but my grandmother's influence was absolute. She didn't actively sabotage them. She didn't have to. Their own desperation did that for them. Jamie and Serena postponed the wedding indefinitely. My mother raged about embarrassment and social suicide. My father retreated into cold silence, the kind that had always been his weapon of choice. They cut me off completely, as if I'd been the architect of their downfall rather than just a witness to it. But something interesting happened in the ruins of their social ambitions. Jamie started calling me more, not to complain or scheme but to talk. Really talk the way we hadn't since we were kids. I've been thinking, he said during one of these calls, about what you said, about who I am when I'm not trying to be their perfect son. And I don't know yet. That's the terrifying part. I'm 35 years old, and I don't know who I am outside of their expectations. That's not terrifying, I said. That's freedom. Most people never get the chance to find out. Serena's been offered a position with Doctors Without Borders in Syria. Wow, that's incredible. She wants me to come with her. Not as a doctor. I'd be useless there. But they need administrators, people who can handle logistics and planning. Are you considering it? Mom would die. Mom's already dead to us, apparently. What do you want? He was quiet for a long moment. I want to matter. I want to do something that actually helps people instead of just making rich people richer. Then go. Just like that. Just like that. Grandma will be proud. I'll be proud. And you'll be proud of yourself, which is what really matters. They left 3 months later. My parents were apoplectic, but their influence had waned along with their social standing. The wedding that had been canceled became a small ceremony in Grandma's backyard, with just family, real family, and a few close friends. Grandma gave a toast in Mandarin and English about love being the greatest adventure, and even my cynical heart melted a little. As for my grandmother, she settled into her new role with characteristic grace. She kept the little house in Chinatown but also started using the penthouse downtown for business meetings. She restructured the Whitfield Group to focus on sustainable development and community investment. She created a foundation in my grandfather's name, not to whitewash his legacy, but to transform it into something positive. He would have liked this, she told me once, looking out over the city from her penthouse office, using his money to build instead of break. He wasn't a bad man, your grandfather. Just a man caught between worlds, trying to survive in the only way he knew how. Do you miss him? Every day. But I don't miss who we were together. Too much violence, too much fear. That's why I ran. Not just to save myself, but to save your father from becoming what Waylin was. And I succeeded in a way. Robert became successful without bloodshed. He just lost his soul in a different currency. My parents eventually reached out when the money ran low and the friends disappeared. My mother's approach was typical. A letter full of accusations disguised as apologies, demanding rather than asking for forgiveness. My father's was simpler, a request for a loan to save his company. My grandmother met with them once, in the neutral territory of Margaret Liu's office. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later. They wanted me to fix it, she said, to use my money to restore their status, their company, their lives, as if money could resurrect the relationships they killed. What did you tell them? I offered them jobs. Real jobs, not executive positions. Robert could work in accounting. He's good with numbers when his ego doesn't get in the way. Victoria could work in event planning. She certainly knows how to organize a party. They would earn fair wages, live within their means, remember what it's like to work for something instead of scheming for it. Let me guess, they refused. Of course they refused. They'd rather be proudly poor than humbly comfortable. But the offer stands. It will always stand. They're still my family, even if they've forgotten what that means. That was 2 years ago. I haven't heard from my parents since, though I know through others that they're living in a small apartment in Tacoma, still plotting their return to greatness, still blaming everyone but themselves for their fall. Jamie and Serena send updates from wherever they are. Photos of refugee camps and makeshift hospitals, stories of small victories and large heartbreaks. They're happy in a way I never saw when they were planning their society wedding. They're doing work that matters, becoming people they can respect. And my grandmother? She's become something of a legend in Seattle. The secret heiress who chose love over luxury, who hid in plain sight for 40 years only to emerge when her family needed reminding of what really mattered. She still clips coupons, though now it's more of a game than a necessity. She still makes dumplings by hand, teaching Lily and her baby brother the same recipes she taught me. Was it worth it? I asked her recently. All the years of hiding, the secret keeping, the careful performance? Ask me when I'm dying, she said with characteristic directness. When I'm looking back on everything, weighing the choices I made. But right now, sitting here with you, with my great-grandchildren, in this kitchen where love was always more important than money. Yes, it was worth it. Even losing Dad? I didn't lose him, Daniel. He lost himself. And maybe someday he'll find his way back. People do, sometimes, when they finally run out of other people to blame. You really believe that? I believe in hope, she said. It's the only thing worth more than money. Hope that people can change. Hope that love can overcome pride. Hope that the truth, when it finally comes out, can heal as much as it hurts. I think about that conversation often, especially when I'm designing buildings. Every structure starts with hope. Hope that the foundation will hold, that the materials will bear the weight, that something beautiful and lasting can rise from careful planning and hard work. But sometimes you have to tear down what's not working, no matter how much effort went into building it. Sometimes you have to go back to the foundation and start over. That's what my grandmother did that night at the country club. She demolished the false structure my parents had built and showed us the real foundation underneath. Love, family, community, truth. It wasn't always pretty. The rubble of their ambitions made a mess that we're still cleaning up. But what's emerging from that destruction is something honest, something real, something that might actually last. My parents built their lives on appearances, and appearances crumbled the moment someone with more money decided they should. But my grandmother built hers on something sturdier, the quiet accumulation of kindness, the compound interest of community, the unshakable foundation of knowing who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. She taught me that, not through words or grand gestures, but through years of patient example. Every dumpling folded with care, every story told with love, every sacrifice made without expectation of return. That's wealth. That's legacy. That's the inheritance that actually matters. The fortune she revealed was never the point. It was just the punctuation mark on a lesson 40 years in the making. That the only things worth having are the things money can't buy. And the only family worth claiming is the one that loves you whether you're a rustic widow or a secret heiress, whether you're rising or falling, whether you bring honor or embarrassment to their carefully maintained facades. My grandmother knew that all along. It just took the rest of us a while to catch up. But we're learning. Slowly, sometimes painfully, but learning nonetheless. Jamie learned it in a refugee camp in Syria. I learned it in a country club in Seattle. Maybe someday my parents will learn it too, though I'm not holding my breath. In the meantime, life goes on. I design buildings that try to bridge the gap between ambition and community. Melissa works with kids who remind us daily that status means nothing to a 5-year-old who just wants someone to read them a story. Our children grow up knowing their great-grandmother as both the woman who makes the best dumplings in Chinatown and the one who owns half the city skyline. And every Sunday, we gather in that little kitchen that's worth millions but feels priceless, where the only currency that matters is showing up, and the only status that counts is family. Not the family you're assigned by blood or law, but the one you choose through loyalty and love. The one that sees you clearly and loves you anyway. The one that knows all your secrets and keeps them until you're ready to tell them yourself. That's the fortune my grandmother gave us. Not the money, though that certainly didn't hurt, but the understanding that wealth without wisdom is poverty, and family without forgiveness is just a group of strangers sharing DNA. She could have revealed her fortune at any time over the past 40 years, could have silenced every slight, answered every insult with a bank statement. But she waited until the moment when the lesson would hit hardest, when the contrast between perceived value and real worth was too stark to ignore. That's the thing about truth. Timing is everything. Reveal it too early and people aren't ready to hear it. Too late and the damage is irreversible. But sometimes, if you're patient and lucky and surrounded by the right lawyers, you can find the perfect moment to let the mask drop and show the world who you really are. For my grandmother, that moment came at a country club in Seattle, surrounded by the kind of people my parents had sold their souls to impress. She walked into that room not as the rustic widow they dismissed, but as Eleanor Chun, survivor and keeper of secrets, protector of communities and destroyer of pretensions. And in doing so, she gave us all permission to drop our own masks, to stop pretending we were something we weren't, to admit that the emperor had no clothes and the rustic widow had $500 million. It was the best wedding gift Jamie never received. The gift of seeing our family clearly, of understanding what we'd gained and lost in the pursuit of acceptance from people who didn't matter. The gift of choosing different priorities, of building different lives, of becoming different people than our parents had tried to make us. So here's to the rustic widows and secret millionaires, the grandmothers who love us without condition and the families we choose for ourselves. Here's to the truth that sets us free, even when it burns down everything we thought we knew. Here's to the wealth that can't be counted and the love that can't be bought. And here's to my grandmother, Eleanor Chun, who taught me that the best revenge isn't living well. It's living authentically, surrounded by people who'd love you just as much if you had nothing at all. That's real wealth. Everything else is just paper. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered, you know these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.